This is a very special Wrestling with Sports one I am super duper excited to bring you. And I did use the word duper, which means I'm so excited. For those who are new, welcome to Wrestling with Sports. It's a hybrid show where we talk a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of sports, nothing too deep on either end. So if you're a fan of sports but you don't like wrestling, or you like wrestling but you're not a fan of sports, you can kind of pick and choose through the episodes. I hope that you will go and listen to some of our past shows. Some great stuff. But today, Jason Kendall, former Major League Baseball catcher with the Pirates, the Brewers. He played a little with the Cubs, Kansas City, a couple other teams, I believe. Dimitri Young, who's a Major League Baseball outfielder. I think he played some first base too. We sit down with Jimmy Pardo, who I can't say enough amazing things about this guy, who has given up time and time again on different podcast projects I've done to sit down and allow me to interview him. I had fun with him, hanging out with him at Tiger Stadium the one time. He is such an amazing, fun guy. There is some questionable language in this. I want to warn you first and foremost that if you have any children, probably don't want them to listen to this episode. It is very adult-oriented. There is some salty language, but it is... it is what it is. It makes the show good this week. So it is uncensored. We try to bring you for the most part, a pretty clean show. But this week, all bets are off. Jimmy Pardo, great interview. It's fun. Now, a little more about Wrestling with Sports. We're a very fan-friendly show. So if you listen and there's a topic you want us to cover, we do a lot of lists, a lot of... voting, Tournament of Champions as we call it. It's kind of a takeoff the March Madness where we vote to see who goes on and win different things. We've done movies, we've done wrestling, we're going to do other things. We will take requests. I'll give you the phone number and the email address here in a second, but hopefully the show is diverse enough where if you like some wrestling but you don't like sports, as I said, or you might like sports but you don't like wrestling, there's still enough that you can pick through and be entertained. So without further ado, and by the way, 248-455-6565 is the call-in number. You call, you leave your name, where you're calling from, and a question, a topic, spark, debate, or conversation. We welcome your participation in the show. If you don't want to do that, you can email wrestlingwithsports@gmail.com. Over the last few months, the show has just blown up, so we have a lot of new fans, and each week we try to take a second to thank them. This week we didn't really get a chance because we had an hour-long interview with Jimmy Pardo, but we thank each and every one of you for downloading, subscribing. If you have any troubles finding the show, just email us, and we'll send you links. We try to do whatever we can to help people find the show. We're still relatively new in the grand scheme of podcasting, although I've been around for a long time, but the show itself is still pretty new. It's grown amazing over the last few months. So we are very excited. We're thankful that each and every one of you download and telling a friend. That is the biggest part of the show. So if you like sports, if you like wrestling, if you like some tomfoolery, be sure to just give a couple past episodes a listen. We would love to have you guys as a fan. If you're new and you're waiting for the Jimmy Pardo, we're not going to add in any cute music that'll bridge us over. So in just like 2 seconds, you're going to hear the start of the Jimmy Pardo interview, which I didn't expect to have to do an intro to it, but I did. So you'll hear me reintroduce the show. But one more time, if you want to be part of the show, 248-455-6565. Leave your name, where you live, and whatever you want us to talk about. If you have a question, if you disagree with something you've heard, we are more than happy. And your voicemail will probably be played on the podcast. So we're really excited about that. Or wrestlingwithsports@gmail.com. So without further ado, Jimmy Pardo. All right, guys, it's time for another Wrestling with Sports episode. Myself, Dennis Farrell, alongside Dimitri Young, Jason Kendall. And Jason, we have a guest this week.
Oh, and I'm so excited. I've been a huge fan, and I can't wait. I have so many questions for him, and hopefully I can get him in.
You probably won't.
With the length of the show. But, no, I'm very excited to have Jimmy Pardo with us.
Yes, Dimitri.
Dimitri is barely chomping at the bit to ask a question. The answer, Dimitri, is yes. I'm wearing a White Sox shirt because I want you Tigers and Cubs to know exactly where I'm coming from. Do you understand what I'm saying?
That is one of the first things I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
I have never. This is Jimmy and my first time meeting each other, and I have never ever just met somebody from Chicago that is a White Sox fan. You must have grown up. I mean, it's all Cubs, Cubs, Cubs. Tell me about that. I mean, White Sox fan?
Well, first of all, I am not one of these I hate the Cubs guys. I'm not that. I don't understand that. I don't hate a single team. What are we mad at? Close? Who gives a shit?
Right.
So I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago, initially the south side of Chicago, and then we grew up to the south. Then we moved to the south suburbs. And while the first game I went to was a Cubs game with my dad, the second game was a White Sox game, and I saw a player way before your time, a guy named Alan Bannister. Was kind of a utility guy, kind of bounced around from position to position, kind of just a journeyman player who I saw him make two things happen at that game. One was he was playing second base and he turned a double play where like he jumped up over the guy sliding in, and that picture made the back of the Sun-Times the next day. He also got hit in the head by a pitch and then jumped up and ran to first base. And there's something about that as a kid. I just went, you know what? That's going to be my favorite player. And so he became my favorite player, and then therefore the White Sox became my favorite team, and then I became obsessed with them for most of my life, except for like 86 to 92. I didn't care at all about baseball because I was working in the music business and stuff was different. So that's why I'm a White Sox fan. Long-windedly, there's my answer.
You know what? I love it, and because it's so funny. Everybody has a different story, and most of the teams are going to be closer to your hometown where you grew up. And I was a huge Angel fan, and I grew up in Los Angeles, obviously. But that's such a cool story because if you look behind the scenes, there's always something why do you like this team? And that to me right there is amazing because you were watching when it was not to outdate yourself or myself. I know exactly who you're talking about, but that's how they played the game back then. That is old school stuff. You got hit. I'm gonna go to first base. None of this showboating. You went out and you played. He probably got torn up at second base.
Right.
And still made the double play. That's awesome. So thanks for sharing that.
You bet. And it was also at a time where and I understand the game changes but nobody was wearing protective gear or anything, and nobody had muscles. Like Alan Bannister just looked like a guy who you would have seen just working at a bank if he wasn't working. Actually, they all kind of looked that way. All the baseball players back then just kind of looked like dudes that went, okay, now it's time to go to the ballpark instead of
if you go back in that era too, because my old man played back there, they had maybe a couple sets of dumbbells, and that's
is that right?
That's pretty much it in the locker room. So
Jason, I apologize. I don't know your father. Who did your father play for? I don't know that.
The Red Sox. Well, he played for the Padres for most of his career. His name's Fred Kendall. He's a catcher as well. San Diego Padres, and then he got traded to the Cleveland Indians for 2 years, and then him and Dennis Eckersley got traded to the Red Sox for a year, and then he went back to San Diego. So played 12 years in the big leagues. And
what years was that?
69 through 80.
All right, so it would have been the time when I was watching baseball, but it's also one of those times like when you're a kid, and you guys know this from growing up, you kind of only know the other teams from Monday Night Baseball, when that existed, and baseball cards. Like, that's the only way that you really knew other players, but now when you're able to have the MLB package or play fantasy baseball, you know everybody. But back then, like, your dad would have, unless he was Reggie Jackson or Jim Rice or, Freddie Lynn, you didn't really know many guys. So I apologize for not knowing your dad. I didn't. I feel like an idiot.
Not a problem at all. Heck, I don't think they even had cell phones until my first year in the big league. So thank goodness for that. But
right,
Dimitri.
Yeah, I was watching a lot of your clips last night. With doing Conan O'Brien, and you was talking about your son Oliver, and
yes,
and just the way that he is, and when you all watched the movie Brave together, that really made me laugh. And then when they went on with that, can you tell me that story, especially with your famous father-in-law?
Sure. The story is that I took my son to see the movie Brave, which is not as advertised. I kind of advertised it as a family romp. Just another one of those, animated movies that the whole family's going to enjoy. And it turns out it's a kind of a drama. It's a kind of more of They marketed it as a little girl who likes to shoot bow and arrow and ride around on horses and stuff. But it ends up being this bonding movie where a mother turns into a bear and has to fight another bear to death and rips that bear's heart out like it's Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. And hang on. God damn it. The gardeners come right now. Hang on. I got to close the window, gentlemen.
Hey, no.
And by the way, what kind of a rich asshole do I sound like? Guys, the gardeners are here. Let me close the window. You can't go out and mow your own lawn during a quarantine, you jerk.
Jimmy, don't worry about it. I had to stop the show the other day for the same reason.
All right, well, good. I feel good. I'm making MLB money. That's what I learned from this. So we're watching Brave, and it's an intense movie for kids. Like every kid in the movie theater is crying, and because they're scared of what's happening on the screen. I look over at my son, and he's stoic. He's just watching the screen. He gets it. And then when it becomes like a bonding movie, like it emotionally hit me because I felt like, maybe I should be closer with my mom. Maybe I should be closer with my dad. Maybe I'll reach out after this movie. And it really hit me. So I start crying, and my son looks over at me and sees me crying, and no shame. He understands his dad's working out some issues. And the movie ends, and everybody everybody in the movie theater like jumps up to get the hell out of there because they can't believe they brought their kids to this movie. And my son, who wants to leave the second that the movie's over to go and play the arcade games, he's sitting there. He's watching every word of the credits scroll up the screen. And at the time he's like 6, so unless the words hut and pig show up, he's not going to know what anything up there means, right? He's not going to turn to me and go, "Hey, Dad, what's a gaffer do?" You know what I mean? He's not going to do that. And I'm grateful because I don't know what a gaffer does, which is insane because I'm in show business, and B, I have Google. So he's watching every and I'm so proud of him. I'm like, look at this kid. He gets it. These other kids are stupid. They're dumb. They're scared. My kid's smart, and he gets it. And then the second the last piece of last word of the credits roll up, he stands up in the movie theater and goes, "That's it? I'm never seeing that movie ever again." He hated it. Here, I thought I was going to bond with my kid. Like I'd be on my deathbed going, "We'll always have Brave, son," and then die. Instead, now he mocks me with it. In fact, not long after we saw that movie, we were at the beach, and we were in the water, and the waves started getting a little big. And I said, "Hey, Oliver, the waves are getting a little big. You want to go in? You want to go on the sand? Or you want to stay out in the water like a brave little boy?" And he goes, "Brave? I'm never seeing that movie ever again." So that happened, and then about 2 weeks after we saw that movie, to your point, Dimitri, my father-in-law, who is Walter Koenig, who played the Chekhov on the original Star Trek series, he was getting his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which is it's like that's the Baseball Hall of Fame. That is the coolest. That's an MVP. That's the coolest thing you can get in show. I mean, you can get an Oscar and all that, but to get your star on the Walk of Fame is like, it's the thing that when you're a kid doing drama in school, you dream of that. You dream of, hey, maybe one day I'll get to give a speech at the Oscars, or maybe I'll get a star on the Walk of Fame. So my father-in-law was getting it, and we're all there, and it was like 100. We were in this weird heat wave here in Los Angeles. Like it was 110 degrees for like 5 days in a row, which is very rare here. And it's sweaty, and we're boiling, and my son's in a suit because it's a respectful day. And, all the paparazzi is out on Hollywood Boulevard, and all the Trekkies are out there in all of their costumes and stuff. And like thousands of people out there. And you can see this on YouTube. So they're giving the speech awarding the star to Walter, and they're like, Walter Koenig from Star Trek, it's long overdue. We're proud to present this. And just off to the side, you hear my son go, "This is the worst day of my life." and I swoop in. You can see me on the YouTube. I kind of just swoop in, give a little nod to camera so I get the credit, then back off. And I say to her, I said, "Oliver, you can't say that. This is a big day for Grandpa." And he goes, "Well, it's a little day for me." And I now embarrass him 6 years later with that story.
Well played.
That is so funny because I think once we have children, we all become wimps and sit there. I can sad commercial, sit there and start crying, and you look over and there's like, really, what do you do? And so I get that big time. That is classic, especially because the star is like the thing. You get that star, it is the Hall of Fame of Hollywood.
And to your point, Jason, I don't know how you guys are doing there during this quarantine, but for some reason, I do cry at the drop of a hat. A commercial will get me, a sad ending of Amazing Race will get me, something inspirational will get me. But during this quarantine, I feel like everything's getting me. Like emotion, like my emotions are just right here waiting to come out. Like whether it's crying or anger or rage, like whatever. My emotions are right there. Are you guys experiencing the same thing?
Jimmy, I sit there and watch The Voice, and I'll work out every morning. I watch The Voice, and they have like a sad story, and I sit there on the treadmill going, and then I go up, try to find my kids to give them a hug or something like that, and I see them more when they're not quarantined. They just, I'm not cool, and I'm like, guys, I'm probably the coolest dad in your whole school.
No question.
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all.
How y'all getting emotional during this time? I just started working out. That's what I do. I just do some push-ups and some squat thrusts. I don't think anybody knows what squat thrusts are.
First time ever in your life, Dimitri.
Yes. I just try to do some writing and stuff. I can't get emotional because I do enough crying watching Grey's Anatomy.
All right, well, you get it out. See, but you get it out during that.
You get it out, though. You're right.
So it's there. And I don't know what a squat thrust is. I know what a squat is. I know it affects my quads, but I don't know what a thrust is.
Oh, it's when you go down, you put your hands down, and you kick your legs out, and then you kick them back in, and then you stand up. It's like an old school exercise that we were doing growing up.
It's kind of like a Russian dance. Does it look like that?
Well, probably. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't want to say Russian. All of a sudden, we'll have some conspiracy theory going on.
Something will pop up here.
Hey, my name is Dimitri. I'm the Black Russian.
Jimmy, I have a question that I've always wanted to ask comedians. And do you? And obviously today you got your cell phones and notepads, or I don't know what you do, but are you just nonstop, 24/7 looking for material and to? Because I've watched you, I've been a fan of you, and you have new stuff all the time. And I just remember when I used to play, when I'd catch, I'd wake up like at 2 or 3 in the morning, like, why'd you throw the slider? Well, you should throw the fastball. And it was just nonstop 24/7 of me thinking about the game, the lineup, and everything. But I know that in your business, you have to come up with new material all the time. Are you a notepad guy, cell phone guy? I mean, do you do that?
I am not. I am not full disclosure. I'm not a great joke writer. I'm a guy who is very funny in the moment, and I can share a story or whatever. So like for instance, the story about my son and seeing Brave. Like I remember leaving there and going, oh, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to make a note of that. But I'm not really a good joke writer. So, but I improvise a lot of my show, and I try to bounce off the crowd. Or if you see me like on Conan or doing something like that, I'm grateful that when Conan and I go off the card and we're able to just have a conversation and be funny in the moment. But there are other guys like Seinfeld where everything Seinfeld says or does or sees, he writes down and then figures out a way to make that into a joke. And my brain doesn't work that way. My brain will be more like I'll tell a story to somebody and somebody will say, dude, you got to make that into put that in the act. You got to make that into a bit. And then that's when I will then go home and go, hey, you know what? That story about going to Target, I can make that work. So that's how I work. But I think most guys will spend times like Gary Goldman, who's one of the best working right now, or John Mulaney, one of the best working. I know those guys sit down to their computer every day and go, okay, I'm going to write for 3 hours today. And I can't do that. Boy, do I wish I could, but I can't.
That is amazing. That really is amazing because I've always wanted that because, I mean, if you're just taking a walk right now, especially at a time like this, and you're taking a walk and you see, I don't know, you see somebody trip or fall. I was just... But just ad-libbing it and just off the top of your head, that's actually, you're brilliant for doing that because I'd like to say you're brilliant for doing that because that's how I was calling a game too. So I guess I'm probably brilliant too. But
there's no question, brilliant. That's what it's about. that was just a long-winded way for you to get to you calling yourself brilliant. I like that.
Without a doubt.
Jimmy, let me ask you a question, and then more importantly, tell you how great I was behind the plate. That's.
Let me jump in. Here.
Hey Jimmy, I wanted to tell Jimmy, you sound like an agent.
How do I sound like?
You talk like an agent. You will get in there and you can get a deal done. I was watching all your stuff last night, and I was just like, man, you remind me of my old agent. Just come in there, shoot the bull, say what you got to say, kind of schmooze over the crowd, and me myself, I don't think of myself as a comedian at all. I think I'm a little funny, but I was wanting to know, how do you get into the art of storytelling? Because every clip that I saw, you were storytelling, and you had me captivated the entire time. Like I just had to watch it till the very end.
Well, first of all, I'm going to call Scott Boras and see if I can get a job at his agency and see if once this comedy thing is, I age out of it. You know, I don't know, Dimitri. Again, I think it just goes back to what Jason was asking about. I'm just kind of a guy who, and I'm using other people's words, that, I have funny in my bones, and I'm just able to, tell a story funny as opposed to writing jokes. And again, I go back to it. I wish to God I could write jokes. I really do. I wish I could sit down, especially during this quarantine. I wish I could sit down at my computer and go, hey, you know what? I got nothing to do. How many times could I put off cleaning the closet? So I'm going to sit down and type and write, and I just can't do it. So, I'm sure something will come out once we get back on stage. I'm sure something will come into my head, and I'll improvise it. And it'll probably take about 10 times on stage before I find the actual full story. The first few times it might be a little joke light, but luckily my audience and my fans know that I'll eventually find it. I think it's just that, Dimitri. I think I just, luckily I'm able to spin a pretty good story. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the audience is the judge of that.
I want to jump in and talk more of the showbiz sides of things with this quarantine, because we discuss a lot on the show if fans will come back to baseball, when they will, how many will come back. What do you think the quarantine will have on the comedy industry? Will people come back out, or is it going to be slow for comics to start getting paid again? Because in my mind, this is probably the best years of comedy, the last 5 years in the history of comedy, with comedians with podcasts, people coming out to shows, small clubs selling out. Does this bounce back? Do people come back? I mean, how does this quarantine now affect the comedy industry?
That's a great question. And to your point, though, about, comedy was huge, in the 80s. And then in the early 90s, it disappeared. And it did come back so strongly in the last 5 years because of podcasting and Netflix and stuff like that. And right in the middle of this great boom where everybody's doing well and people are really into comedy, here comes this quarantine. And I don't know the answer to that. I was talking to a club owner recently. He was kind enough to call me and obviously had to cancel my dates. I mean, then push it to the end of the year, and hopefully we'll be able to do it then. And he was even already planning on what he's going to do. And if you're a couple, like a man and a wife, or on a date, he'll seat those two together, but everybody else he's going to put a chair between everybody. So everybody's still as close to 6 feet away as possible. But that means you're looking at, assuming people do come out, Dennis, you're looking at what, a third of a room full if you're taking away every other seat. So that's, maybe half a room at the most. So I think it's going to be weird when we first go. And then also, like, for the guys like me who live in LA that have to travel to the clubs, will they have the money to do that after not being open for several months? So are they going to have to hire just local comics? And by the way, there's great local comics in every city. I'm not suggesting you have to go to LA. We just happen to be more of a draw than the locals. But I think the locals can carry the water for the first few months and get the clubs back going, and then start bringing the guys like us back, which sucks for me financially. But I also understand that that's what the clubs will have to do. That's my guess. But I think it's going to be weird. I think until there's a vaccine, a lot of people won't want to go anywhere. Movies, ball games. There's nothing I would like right now more than to be able to leave at 4 o'clock today and go to Dodger Stadium and watch a game. I remember in '94, I went through a horrible breakup, and then the strike happened, and it was like when the breakup happened, I was like, well, at least I have baseball to watch. And then the strike happened. I'm like, shit, I don't even have that. and I feel like that now with this quarantine. It's like we're stuck inside, and then we can't even watch baseball. So it's like, I know some people are against baseball playing in front of fanless stadiums, or but I don't know if I'm being selfish, but it's like I hope that happens so that we at home have a distraction for 3 hours or 6 hours if you want to watch two games, whatever you want to do.
But it's funny you say that, because that's what Dimitri, we have been trying to tell Dennis, because Dennis he's just like anti no fans in the ballpark. But Dimitri and I both always go back to 9/11, where when we were both playing, and it was a two week hiatus, and it was, I remember the day it happened, traveling technical calls, and then like the following day we hopped on a bus to Chicago to play the Cubs. I was with Pittsburgh, and halfway there we were told by the union to turn back around and go home, and we're going to shut everything down. But I will say this, when baseball did start up, it gave people, just like you said, Jimmy, it gave people a 3-hour break to not think of what's going on. And so Dimitri and I have both been telling Dennis, like, you know what, fans in the stands, okay. And Dimitri and I both go back to the Arizona Fall League. Arizona Fall League is for like AA prospects that might be on the verge of making the big leagues. There's nobody in the stands unless, like myself, I was fortunate enough to play with Michael Jordan not play on the same team, but against him. So I knew once a week that there was going to be people in the stands because everybody wanted to see Michael Jordan.
Right.
It's not great for a player. The veteran players are going to be so much more prepared. But Dimitri and I have also been talking about is I worry about the minor league kids. And because there's not going to be a minor league season, bottom line. But the veteran players are going to be ready. But what do you do in the stands? Do you eliminate the 45,000 capacity stadium to where you have to have 6 feet apart from everybody? I mean, now you're not going to make that. But I don't think it matters. I just think they need to get out, play. I don't care where they play. And if they're talking about Arizona, but you're right. It's a 3-hour out for the frontline workers, et cetera, just for everybody just to kind of, you know what, let's watch our team play for 3 hours. And Dennis, for whatever reason, is completely opposed of it. But
I've heard a lot of people are opposed to it. But let me ask you a question. You guys are ball players, so I have a question for you guys, because I heard the idea floated of if they did it here in California, as opposed to Arizona or Florida because of the heat and what have you. You've got Dodger Stadium, you got Angels, you got San Diego, you've got Oakland, and you got San Francisco. So you've got all of those within driving distance. Would you guys as players like that more than being holed up in Arizona and having to play at the same stadiums, or does it not matter to you guys?
For me personally, California is definitely better. I'm in Ventura County myself, so I'm not too far from you. And we have beautiful weather. It's not going to get 120 degrees during the summer, where if we're trying to have baseball during the summer, I mean, it's going to be too hot, and you're going to have to open up the roster a little bit to be able to do that. Whereas in California, like you say, you have – and you can locate between Dodger Stadium, Anaheim. I wouldn't be opposed to doing that at all. That, to me, that's more feasible than being in Arizona, pretty much in one spot burning up the entire year. But if we listen to President Trump, hey, the heat's going to burn off the coronavirus.
Yeah, let's not listen to him. Well, let's listen to experts, right?
I think what they'll do is they'll go to the retractable roof stadiums.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Milwaukee, new Ranger Stadium, Arizona, when they do play in the bigger ballparks. But I just think that the weather-wise in Florida and Arizona, the spring training sites, and I think that's why they, obviously we're picking those, is where they want to play. But no, it's a tough situation. It's uncharted waters. It's uncharted territory, whatever you want to call it. It's a weird time from being an actor, comedian to a an athlete. It's to any type of work you do. I mean, Dennis is on the front line right now, helping making ventilators for people. It is whatever you do.
You're welcome.
It's crazy. It's a crazy time, and I just hope people stay in because I know that certain states are starting to open up, and it's just a scary time.
Yeah, just stay in. And back to the stadium. Remember the game the Orioles and the White Sox played in that empty stadium while the riots were going on in Baltimore? I sat home and watched that game because I thought it'd be interesting to watch it. And admittedly, it was freaking weird to not have any ambient sound or anything.
Was in that game. My brother Delman was playing in that game.
That's right. His brother was in that game.
That's right. I think I've had your brother, you, and Jason all on my fantasy teams, and I want to thank you for successfully getting me into fourth place each and every year. So,
I was going to say, I hope you had me early in my career.
I didn't. Here's a nice story that you guys will enjoy. I hope you will anyway. My buddy Paul Gilmartin used to host a show on TBS called Dinner and a Movie, and he was down at a game because TBS is in Atlanta, of course. And so he was at an Atlanta game, and he had a bunch of Braves call me. And I forget who the Braves were playing, but was Bobby Bonilla on the Braves at any point, or was he play? Maybe they were playing the Mets.
I can remember.
They must have been playing the Mets.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was an All-Star game. Maybe the All-Star game was in Atlanta. At any rate, he had Bobby Bonilla call me on the telephone, and I just pick up the phone, and he goes, "Is this Jimmy?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Jimmy, it's Bobby Bo." And I go, yeah? He goes, Bobby Bonilla. I go, yeah. And he goes, I hear you play fantasy baseball. I go, I do. And he goes, am I on your team? I go, as a matter of fact, you are on my team. And he goes, am I playing? I go, I got to be honest with you. You're on the bench this week. And he goes, how do you put Bobby Bo on the bench? How do you put Bobby Bo on the bench? Never put Bobby. You know what? I'm going to hit a home run tonight just to get back at you. And son of a bitch if he doesn't hit a home run that night. And
I bet he did, yep.
I thought it was hysterical that here's Bobby Bo mad that he's not on some guy's fantasy baseball roster, or at least active.
That yeah, and he has a day named after him, too, July 1st, Bobby Bonilla Day, where he collects from that deferred
That's right.
Deferred
$1
contract.
million for 25
How
years.
long does he collect that too?
25 years. It was $1 million for 25 years. I'm pretty sure.
2000, like 2035 up into that
Something
point?
like that.
I mean, it's like
It's
every
the greatest
year.
contract ever signed in the history of everything.
Would you guys rather? And I apologize if I'm asking too many questions, but
No.
is that something for you guys? Would you prefer to get $1 million a year over getting that crazy, just lump sum at a point, or do I not understand the
Are you
game?
talking about divorced or like pre-divorced or?
Well, I guess I don't know your personal life.
No, you know what? It's a smart move now. I mean, you look at Bobby Bo now. Geez, it's unbelievable. And you look at a lot of when you start making some money, especially when you're younger. The next thing you know, I mean, from taxes to everything else, because I grew up in California as well. But taxes in California. But now you get taxed everywhere you play, even if you're there for only 3 days. So I mean, you might get your say $50 million contract, but you're technically only getting really 25 of it after you're ended up. So people blow through it, and you got to have a good head on your shoulders nowadays, just to be honest with you, to keep that chunk of change and not go through a divorce if you don't have to.
Good advice. Thank you. That's good marital advice.
You know what, though, Jimmy? Another question I want to ask you is, and this might sound dumb, I don't know, but when you go from your stand-up to, and I want to ask you about the Conan stuff as well, when you go from there to like a late night, how hard is it to censor yourself? Because I've watched you, I know what you do, and then because I just know that from speaking and trying to every once in a while, is it difficult for you, or do you just automatically got it and know that, okay, you know what, I'm on ABC or NBC or whatever it may be, I'm golden. Does it just click for you?
It's interesting because like I swear a lot. I don't really do dirty material, but I swear a lot. In fact, my son, who's 12, he came to see me recently. Obviously not that recently, but a few months ago, and I may have said fuck 300 times in my set, and I just every time I said it, I apologized. Oliver, I'm so sorry. Oliver, I'm so sorry. So I swear a lot. So I too was scared. Like it's weird that when you go on TV, Paul Reiser gave me advice like 25 years ago now. That everybody's always worried, like if you swear at the clubs, well, what about TV? How you do? It's like, you know what? You swear in the clubs when you go on TV? You don't. And there is something in your head that just clicks that makes you go, now you don't swear. It's like the same as like doing a corporate gig or something. Like you could swear in the clubs, but if you're doing a gig for GM or something, they don't want you swearing at a gig at 4 p.m. So your brain, hopefully is smart enough to not swear. So
exactly.
I think it's more just I think it's just instincts kick in more than don't swear. Yeah, I think it's just that, Jason. I don't know. Sense memory of knowing how to be a human being. I think it's kind of kicks in.
And it's just doing it over and over and over again. No, I think that's
Now that said, if I go to a PTA meeting or whatever, like if I go to a school meeting, somehow my brain doesn't tell me not to swear at those. I'll say, well, this fucking kid, and I just see the teacher's eyes open up, like, yeah, Jesus, sorry, I didn't mean to swear. And so I know when to do it most of the time, but sometimes I still swear like an idiot.
Have you ever slipped on like a live?
You know what? There was one Conan gig where I said I did say use the F word, but it was part of the story. Like the story doesn't work if you don't use that word. And I have to be honest, the audience wasn't used to it. So instead of like getting the laugh that usually happens with that word, the audience kind of went, oh, because they weren't used to hearing that on TV. And so in retrospect, I would have changed it, but I thought it would still make the same impact that it would, that does when I tell the story.
Do they
in
just
a club
bleep it out?
And they bleep it out for
7
television.
second?
Yeah. So yeah, you're just kind of kicking.
Now,
so hey, and I'll ask, the Conan O'Brien gig. Did you have to go to a casting? Were you guys buddies? because I mean, I'm a huge Conan O'Brien fan, and I watched him every night, especially you guys were usually on after games. By the time we finally got home from baseball games, so I watched him every night. I watched you every night. How'd you get that gig? Because what an unbelievable gig. I always thought.
Well, I was very, very lucky. I was, just kind of bouncing around, comedy clubs and doing shows here in LA and, getting some acting gigs and getting some hosting, game show hosting gigs and, stuff that I enjoy doing. And I had done a few shows with Andy Richter, just a few. And, I don't even know. I would at that point I would say that we were acquaintances and maybe friends, but we were certainly not close, Andy Richter and I. And I had never met Conan O'Brien. I knew one of the writers on the show, and when the show was leaving New York to come to L.A., back in New York they used one of the writers, a guy named Brian McCann, would go out and do the warm up before the show. He would write all day, and then he would do the warm up, and then the show would happen. And when they moved out to L.A., I guess they decided, hey, we have a bigger budget now. It's the Tonight Show. We should hire a guy to just do warm-up. And Conan said, but I don't want one of those regular warm-up guys. I don't want a guy doing dance contests and throwing out candy and all that. I want a guy who's just a funny guy. And Andy Richter, and I thank him to this day, again, I wasn't all that close with Andy, but Andy said, the one guy that could do 10 minutes to an hour off the top of his head that has the same sensibilities as our show is Jimmy Pardo. That's who we should hire. And I got a call saying, hey, the Conan people want to meet you to do warm-up. And I went in. The head writer, Mike Sweeney, told me that story. And I said, he said, are you interested? I go, well, I really didn't move out here to be a warm-up comic. And then they called Conan over, and Conan was like, what do you mean you don't want the job? And then I was like, what am I talking about? I'll take this gig. And so that's how it happened. And it was, and my agent even said, said, what's great about this gig is Conan's not stupid. Conan's the sharpest guy in late night. He's going to see how funny you are, and it's going to go from you're going to start out as a warm up, but he's going to end up using you for more. And sure enough, it took a little time for that to happen, and rightfully so. I had to prove that I could be funny, and before you know it, I was doing remotes for them. I was in sketches. I filled in for Richter as the co-host a couple of times. And it ended up being, I've been gone now from, I guess, 2.5 years I've been gone from that gig. But it was, without hyperbole, Conan O'Brien hiring me was the greatest thing to happen. It was, it just changed, financially. And then also gives you that security of, probably like the same as a ball player. It's like you have a good contract and you can then relax. You don't feel like you're playing for your money. And I had this contract for a few years to work at Conan. So I had security to then be, take chances with my podcast, take more chances with stand-up. So it provided a lot of things in addition to more exposure. So it was all great. So I'm grateful to Andy Richter for suggesting me and Conan for hiring me. It's I'm very, very grateful.
Now, you brought up...
I heard
Dimitri,
you
go ahead.
mention two names, Brian McCann and Mike Sweeney. Those are baseball players, right?
Brian
caliber baseball players.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
I didn't know they were moonlighting as the Hollywood types. But,
as soon as they left the game, they went and wrote.
I watched
Sweeney definitely not.
I watched one of your interviews about you traveling to one place, getting paid $150, and that's the one thing that a lot of people don't see is how guys come up to get to the spot where you're at now. And just like we talk about with baseball players in the minor leagues, you go into the different comedy stores and stuff like that. Can you just tell me a little bit more about? Let me know how it is.
You kind of nailed it. I mean, that's when you start out. Obviously, you don't get paid at all when you're bouncing around doing open mics. You're just trying to get exposure and then get better and improving your craft. And then when you first start getting booked, at least when I did, I would make I left the job at MCA Records at the in the 80s, which was a great job to have in the record business at the time, and I left that to go make $150 a week. Sometimes, some weeks were $75 a week. And luckily, my mom and stepdad were kind enough to let me live at their house, and I didn't have to pay rent. But, you're going there to make no money to get better. And the headliners, when I started, the headliners were making like $10,000 a week. Like they were making crazy money, and I'm making $150. But I understood that's how it worked. Just like, again, with you guys with the minor leaguers or the other thing I like to paying your exact, and then I always like to equate it with the journeyman PGA golfer. Like everybody assumes that the PGA golfers are all rich millionaires, like they do with baseball players, But the journeyman golfer who makes maybe 2 cuts a year, that guy lost money for the year. He's living out of his car. He makes no, and that's how we were. And there are still road comics. That's how you live your life. You live out of your car. You hope to God the gig gives you a hotel for a few days. And then luckily when you get to be, upper levels, you get a hotel, you get, proper money and so on. Thank God that, that's where I'm, once we get out of this quarantine, we'll be back to that. But it's rough when you first start out. But, if it's something you have to do, which is, I feel like comedy is something, if it's in you and you have to do it, you have to do it. You don't have a choice. It's not like, I always want to give comedy a try. It's like something like that drives you to do it. You got to pay all those dues, like Jason said, and just take your lumps and, have shitty shows and make crappy money. And hopefully that it all, pays off in the end.
Do you have a crappy story that you could tell us, like living out of your car? Or, I'm sure you have a million, but one that just pops off the top of your head?
Well, there's, I've told the story many times of, I've been chased to my car twice after shows because some audience members did not care for me. One was in Saginaw, Michigan, where I did a show and the opening act was bombing so badly. He bailed. He was supposed to do 30 minutes and he bailed after 15. And then I went up and I was supposed to do 30 minutes, but we didn't get paid if the whole show didn't go an hour. So I now had to do 45 minutes to make up for this guy's time. And so it was obvious that they hated me too. And so I'm just struggling and just literally just, if I was a boxer, I'm in the corner just getting hit, hit after hit and just sucking so badly. And I was eventually, so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to tell you guys one more thing. And the guy goes, finally. And I go, what do you mean finally? And he goes, you suck. And
Jesus.
I said, you waited 45 minutes to tell me that? He goes, well, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. I went, for 45 minutes? I go, it's pretty obvious early on that I was sucking. And all of a sudden, the audience got on my side, and they're laughing at me reacting to this guy. And this guy literally you just saw him go from thinking he was winning this fight to losing it. And he just starts getting madder, and you could just see he's just getting madder. And he starts doing, punching his hand into his fist like he's going to beat me up. And so I walk off the stage, and the other act goes, you better get out of here, man. I go, yep, you're damn right I better. And so I grab my coat, and I run to my car. And sure enough, this guy and his buddies are chasing after me. And luckily, I got to my car and took off and got away from them. But the next night, I go to the Denny's after our show, and who walks in but that guy and his buddies? And I'm like, mother effer! And it's like, and the guy sees me, he goes, and I even see him mouth to his, that's the guy! And it was like, we're done at Denny's. We get out of the Denny's, we run to my car and get out of there.
Were they trying to sea bass your ass?
Now, I don't know what sea bass means, but I'm going to say yes, they were trying to sea bass me.
Well, hang on now.
Oh, from
Dumb and Dumber, yeah. Dimitri.
Oh, I don't know. Yes, I'll say yes. I don't know.
Dimitri, Jason, have you guys ever been booed out of a stadium?
Oh, that's a great question.
Oh, of course. when we're visiting team, yes. But also at home when you're slumping or you make an error.
Or you're making or you're making some money and then you make an error and you're slumping. Yeah. See, Pennsylvania, I always say, people say, oh, you can play in Boston, you can play in New York. No. Okay, they'd say that's tough. You can play in Pennsylvania, and I have some stories for you guys later, but Pennsylvania, if you get death threats here and there that are sent to the ballpark or because you're making a certain amount of money, but in Pennsylvania, I'm going to follow you home. Yeah, okay. You look back, and there's this guy trying to follow you because when you buy a house out there, it's who bought it, how much, it's all public knowledge.
Right.
And so, yeah, I've had some stories out there, and it's people are sick. People are absolutely sick, but they love their sports, and
yeah.
I'm sure it's just like
they're
actors.
Crazy enough to follow me home.
Well, I think they figured out that I was a little bit nuts too eventually. But when you're struggling and you're making more money than the team, then yeah, it's tough. And if it's sent to the ballpark, all right, a hate mail or whatever. But when it's sent to your actual house and you go home after a game or you wake up in the morning, get your mail, and you're like, geez, this guy or this woman, whoever it is, knows where I live. Those are little things that, yeah, they do happen. I mean,
Isn't that insane? Like you're just playing a game, and they're that affected by it. Like I better let this guy know I'm mad that he struck out 3 times.
Well, I didn't really understand, and I didn't understand until I think I lost some money on one of the Super Bowls or something like that, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? I'm following you home.
Right.
Now, listen, I got to talk about Never Not Funny in your podcast, and if people have not heard it, go out and listen to it. It's one of my favorites, and I truly mean that. I've now been listening to you during your quarantine episodes, which is a totally different feel from your live shows when you have your guests into your studio to do them. Are you guys mindful that, you don't want to do too many in advance because once this thing's over, you want to get people back into the studio? Is there a fine line you're walking between how many in advance you record versus, when this thing's over, kind of thing like that?
Well, we haven't really changed our schedule. The only thing we've changed is we're recording 2 on Mondays instead of 1. We usually record on Mondays and Thursdays, and so we're recording both of them on the Monday because my co-host and producer Matt needs to go to the studio to work the board and all that, and the rest of us are all at our houses. So we never really bank episodes. We have some live shows and stuff that we have in the can in case somebody gets really sick and can't do a show. But otherwise, we're kind of just sticking to our same schedule. And honestly, thank God, because it gives me something to do on Mondays. And in fact, when we're done recording those 2 shows, I'm bored out of my mind and I'm depressed. Like, well, there's my activity for the week. It's like
that's actually hilarious, because I think the reason Dennis is asking you, because we know that you're the best of the best. You're the best one out there. You have been. It's all public knowledge, and that's why we were like, "Oh my, are you kidding me? You got Jimmy?" So I think he's asking because we're the lower of the low. So he's just trying to ask, I think, help us out a little bit. Is what
I will listen. I will, of course, tweet and promote this episode, and people will get a chance to listen to it. And because I've been able to tell some stories and interact in a way that I haven't had a chance to. When you're not, talking to athletes is different than talking to actors and comedians. So it's fun to talk about different things. So they'll be excited to hear this. So you guys will see a bump in your numbers this week. So you're welcome.
Now,
honestly, greatly appreciate it. And I know that you got to go, I think, but I have one more question to ask you because I love this show.
Jason, games. I've got nowhere to go. I'm fucking locked in my house.
Please tell me about the escape game. I loved it. And I love the escape games. I play them on my phone. I take the kids to. Why did that show go away? I was so locked into it.
It was. Thank you. You're talking about a show called Race to Escape that I
Race to Escape
hosted in 2015. And that's the reason I left Conan. I got hired to host that gig, and I got the opportunity. That was another great story. That really never happens to guys at my level, in that I got the call to have the meeting, and they just said, hey, we're doing this show for the Discovery Channel. I'm sorry, for Science Channel, not Discovery. They're all part of the same family. For Science Channel. And they told me all about it, and I was like, wow, that sounds great. And I was also up for another job at that time, oddly enough, on the Playboy Channel.
What are you doing?
It was going from Science and Playboy, like 2 different worlds. And they at the end of this lunch, this guy Riaz said, so what do you think? And I said, well, sounds great. So, keep me posted. And he goes, oh, no, the gig is yours if you want it. I'm like, what? I've never been, I've gotten pilots that way, but I've never got a series, like direct a series. So he's like, so if you want the gig, it's yours. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, I know that happens to famous people. It doesn't happen to guys like me. So I was taken aback by it. And I was, to your point, Jason, I was never more proud to work on. I mean, I was very proud to work at Conan, of course, but I was so proud to host that show because it was a show that families could watch, that everybody can get into. That it was not one of these salacious reality shows. It was, for people that don't know what it was 2 different escape rooms with 2 teams of 3 of the people had never met each other until the lights come up in the room and it begins. They're identical rooms, and they're not only chasing a clock to escape the escape room, they're also trying to beat the other team. And if whatever team could do that faster would win some money.
What, it was $25,000. I mean, it was a good chunk of change.
Now, luckily for the producers, they never had to pay out the $25,000. I think the most might have been 5 or 7. But we ended up doing, I want to say, 8 episodes of it. and might even be only 6 episodes of it because it was such a big show. They had to build a new escape room every episode, and I literally, Jason, I hear even to this day. It's 5 years later that since that show's been on the air, and I'm not kidding. Once a week minimum, I get an email from somebody saying, "Any chance of Race to Escape to come back? Is there any? What happened to Race to Escape? What happened to Race to Escape?" And we got caught up in new management and stuff like that, and the new programming director didn't like the show for some reason and canceled us after our first season. I literally thought that show was going to be on for years. I thought
I loved it. Absolutely. You did an amazing job. And like I said, that was the reason. Like when I say I play escape games on my phone, my wife will be like, "Okay, you done?" Well, I got to try to find. It was unbelievable. And we have, obviously these new businesses are opening up all around us. We're fortunate enough to have about 2 or 3 around us, and we go all the time. We've even gone to ones that we already have beaten. Right. So no, I love the show, and I'm one of those fans that is like, hey, I would love to see this start up again because I loved it.
Me too. And even though I hosted the show and was grateful to host it, even watching it, it was like even if I took myself out of the equation, I would have watched that show. I would have watched the show with my family if Joe Rogan hosted it. I thought it was a great show, and I'm really bummed that it went away so quickly. Mainly because I also left Conan to go do it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, now, if you think of that guy's name, let me know. I'll find him.
Now, shake him down, would you?
Now, Jimmy, I don't know how much time you have left here, but there's a game we like to play on this show where
I'm in.
You and I are fans. You don't win anything, but you and I are fans. And listen, Jason and Dimitri played with a lot of ball players, and we love a little bit of gossip. So we randomly throw out different baseball players' names and sit back and listen to them tell some stories about playing with them or playing against them. So I don't know if you have any guys off the top of your head, but I can throw out a few names and give you a second to think of guys that you might want to hear a story about. But got some time to throw out some names and be a fan of baseball?
I do. I think both of you guys played during this era. Maybe at the tail of his. Jason, were you on the same the Cubs when Sammy Sosa was there? Or were you coming after him?
I was after him, but I played against him. So did Dimitri because we were in the National League Central, so we played against him. The 19 times a year or whatever you played, and obviously played maybe 6 times against the other divisions. But yeah, no, we were both there the whole way.
So do we have any? Do we have confirmation Sammy was juicing, or do we just all just assume he was? Or
I don't know if he's juicing. I know he's white right now, and his rookie card's probably going to be worth some money. I'm gonna tell you what, Sammy was. He could hit a baseball. I don't know him too much personally. Dimitri, you might have more stories, but I mean, he was always cool to me. Obviously, when everything came out, and it was like, it is what it is, I guess. But I mean, bottom line, in my opinion, he's only gonna the whole steroid era. If you took steroids, all you're doing is you're cheating your family. This is just straight mind, because you're gonna die 10 years earlier. You're not gonna be there for another 10-year period to watch your family grow up, kids, grandkids, et cetera, et cetera. But I can honestly say Sammy was. I went to Japan with Sammy, and that was the year that him and Mark McGwire, obviously the whole chase that kind of brought baseball back a little bit. And he hit a home run his first. It was an exhibition game, and Japan baseball is different. He hit a home run, and I want to say this is on YouTube or whatever, but we were losing in an exhibition game against the Japan All-Stars, and he hit a 2 or 3 run home run, I believe, to right field, and it was one of those, like, okay, somebody threw up and in on somebody, and it's like, okay, we know this is kind of a fun game and fun, for the fans, and we're making some money, but wait, you just almost dropped Nomar Garcia Parra and up by his neck. Sammy hits a home run. He comes, he touches home plate, and he looks to everybody, he drops a bow. It was a pretty cool moment just to be a part of that team. But I have nothing bad, it was awesome time.
I always loved him as a player.
I loved him as well. I also had the same agent as he did at the time, so I would see him out in Chicago, and I was a younger player, so I would have my old high school buddies flying to Chicago or whatnot, and Sammy was nice as pie. Sat there and had a conversation with him. Well, I'm going to go into a story about 1999. We opened up there, and needless to say, Sammy Sosa runs out and does his thing in right field, and he has the American flag. He's running down there and stuff. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do the same thing. So I did the same thing. I run out there to right field. Yeah. Boo, boo. And the entire time, they're sitting there. And I was a bigger ball player than I am now. I'm like 235. I was about 270 when I played, and bigger. But I was grabbing my genitalia the entire time, like F you, F you. So the top of the sixth inning, Jeffrey Hammonds is in center field, and all of a sudden he just turned around and I'm in right, and he points to the stands. There's a 6-foot inflatable penis with my name spelled correctly, Dmitri. A lot of people like to put the I in front of the M. Spelled correctly. All I could do is take my hat off and start. I mean, they were just holding it up too. It was a big, long penis too. And so after that, just tip my cap to the fans, and I was like, I'll never imitate Sammy again.
Oh, he's like the Beatles in that era. It was pretty cool to watch.
Well,
Dennis, can I ask one more question?
Please. We got
so
time.
I think this was before your guys' era, but maybe you know this. There was always rumors that the character in Major League, Willie Mays Hayes, was based on a real player. Do you guys know who that real player was by any chance?
No, and I don't, and I should, because I was with Milwaukee. I was with Euchre, Pete Vukovich, who was Clu Haywood, the first baseman. He was my pitching coach in Pittsburgh, and still talk all the time today. And when he was up hitting and he said, "Hey, how are your wife and my kids?" That was his line.
Oh, is that right?
And Euchre ad-libbed a lot of that as well. But I do not know who exactly. I mean, if you have any idea, I mean, I would say.
Is it Kenny Lofton?
I was going to say it'd be Kenny Lofton. That's exactly what I was going to say. If anybody
was
Kenny,
have to
find that out.
Yeah, please do, because it's one of those, like, I can't pull any names right now, but I remember hearing different rumors about who it could be. So I figured I'd go to a couple of experts.
Well,
no, you know what? I don't know that, and I know that it was filmed in Milwaukee County, most of those games. I will say this. I was actually listening to the MLB channel. I think I told Dimitri and Dennis that Jabu, he actually hit a home run out of the ballpark because they had the stands there after they finished the game in Milwaukee, and it's extras. And so he actually hit a ball. He said, it barely went out. It barely went out, but he goes running around the bases and the crowd going nuts. It's probably like a Saturday night firework night or something like that. But he said he actually hit a ball out instead of having the jugs machine, shoot the ball out. So I did hear that the other day. That was actually really cool.
Now, in honor of Jimmy being a White Sox fan, I'll throw out 2 names here for you guys to gossip about. Let's start with one I know you played with, Jason. How about Frank Thomas?
Oh, Frank was without a doubt the coolest guy in the world. Wow. Boy, did he bitch. He bitched and bitched. Ball could be right down the middle of the plate. And that's the ball. What you talking about? And we'd be like, Frank, geez. So we had Kangaroo Court in our clubhouse. And we had such an unbelievable team as 2006. We went to the playoffs. Swear we should have won the World Series, but we had too many days off, in my opinion, at the Coliseum because the Yankees and Tigers were playing. But I was the judge. And we had one hell of a party at the end of 2006. Trust me, we had so much money. Nick Swisher he must have had, he got fined every time. But Frank would always get fined for bitching. Like, hey, Big Frank, come on, man. The ball's right down in the middle. No, it's not. No, it's not. Go back of the video, show him on the video, and be right down the middle. Go, yeah, you guys are probably right. You're probably right. But Frank was the biggest sweetheart in the world. Most amazing person. I can't say one negative thing about him. He was just a great teammate, and boy, did he help carry us. And I will say this, with your White Sox, it was really, really cool because that year we went back to Chicago, and obviously Frank Thomas is a Hall of Famer, and he's Frank Thomas, but first at bat, boom, home run, standing ovation by everybody. Once again, it was like a Friday or Saturday night. Next at bat, I think he got walked. Third at bat, boom, home run, standing boo. It was awesome, though, because, I mean, when his name was announced and people, I mean, the whole place was nothing. It was sold out at Comiskey or whatever. I don't even know what it's called now. But it was really, really cool moment because we all knew how big he was and that he's a future Hall of Famer. And when he hit that first home run, you talk about goosebumps.
Yeah.
It was awesome. But when he hit that second home run, and the boost, it was just like, it was legend stuff. So
right.
Very, very cool. Cool one to bring up, Dennis.
Dimitri?
Dimitri's not there, Dennis. He's here he goes. Come on, Dimitri, get back.
Come on, D. There he is.
Frank Thomas, what do you got?
You talking about Frank Thomas story? I just like the ass that he's doing now.
What
all right now.
What are the?
I don't really have any. I mean, I was on the same card as Frank Thomas, but had comparisons to him and stuff, and then being an opposing player, when we sit there and watch him hit, because he wore his pants so tight, he would give us that reverse camel toe.
Right there, Dimitri Young, Frank Thomas.
Look at that.
So
I had to whip that out the other day for him.
I'm amazed that you have that at the ready. That's fascinating to me.
He does. He has
right?
so much.
It's a long story, but.
And let's go with someone I know Jimmy hates as a manager. I don't know how he feels as him as a player, but Robin Ventura.
I think if before these guys jump in, I think Robin Ventura is one of my favorite players of all time. I think he should not have been hired to manage. Those are my thoughts on that. My nicest thoughts on that as a fan who doesn't understand the game.
No, Robin Ventura, a great ball player, played against him when he was with the Mets. And, every time I see Robin Ventura, the first thing I think of is not the 48-game hitting streak that he had at Oklahoma State when he was in college, but when he decided after he got hit to charge Nolan Ryan and take them 6 knuckles. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And why did you do that? Went on in your head that, you know what, I'm going to go charge Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, why would he attack basically just this big hillbilly? Like he goes after him, he's going to get his ass kicked.
I actually have a really cool Robin Ventura story that Jimmy that's going to help you like him more. But in 1999, I snapped my ankle. Had the bone sticking out, foot facing towards me, and I'm like, this is not good. Well, the year before, Robin Ventura had done something at home plate in Sarasota, sliding in the spring training game, and it wasn't the same injury that I had, but it was very similar where leg is just flapping. And he called me, and he didn't know me. I didn't know him, but there were certain guys who called me who'd been through something very similar. Lou was one. Ventura was one. And so even still to this day, because Robin contacted me and Moises Alou and there's Brian Buchanan, I still contact today. Like if you see any injury on TV, which there's been a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, whether it be basketball, football, Alex Smith, for instance, and I call, leave a message and say, hey, you know what, if you ever want somebody to talk to, because the whole rehab process and that whole thing was, and this is what Robin told me, he goes, there's going to be a 2-week process in your rehab that you think you're done. You're not going to make it. But once you get over that hump, you're golden. And sure as can be, that 2-week process came, and I'm just like, oh, my God. And I remembered what Robin told me. And so I passed that information on to players, whether it be an ACL, ankle, et cetera, that, you know what, once you get past that hump, you're going to be all right if you work your butt off. So that's my feel-good Robin Ventura story for you guys.
And again, to be clear, I loved him as a player. I thought it was an odd managerial choice.
He didn't know how to manage the bullpen
at all. I remember one time there was a game. The two guys, I can't pull their names. Both the announcers for Kansas City were like, literally one time he went to the bullpen again, and the two Royals announcers were like, he's going to the bullpen again. Like they were like, enough's enough with this.
No, Rex Hudler and Ryan Lefevre, because I used to work with the Royals up until maybe last year, I believe. Oh. So I was with them their whole ride. So yeah, I got to watch Robin on a daily basis because once again, American League Central.
Right.
Yes, managing the bullpen was not his strong suit.
Yeah.
Any other names, Jimmy, you want to throw out?
You know what? I don't. I think you actually literally it was Sammy, and then you hit the two guys I was going to ask about, Big Frank and Robin. So I'm covered.
All right. So listen, before we let you go and enjoy the rest of your day sitting around doing nothing, can you tell everybody where to find Never Not Funny, your Twitter feed, if there's a Never Not Funny Twitter feed, any other things you want to throw out there?
You know what? It can't be simpler. At Jimmy Pardo for Twitter, at Never Not Funny for the podcast Twitter, nevernotfunny.com for the podcast, and jimmypardo.com for me, which of course then links to everything else. So really, jimmypardo.com is the place to go to see and get any nonsense that you need to about my BS.
All right.
And without a doubt, the best podcast that is out there. And
thank you.
We are so fortunate enough to have him. So, Jimmy, thank you very much for joining us.
It was my honor. It was my pleasure. This was a nice change of pace. I mean that sincerely. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you.